So, welcome. We are here with the fourth chapter, and being very close to our daily lives topic, this is going to be just one slide show for the entire chapter, and it is pretty simple. So, let's get started. The first one, or the highlight of the chapter, should be the important concepts that we want to see. So, starting with what is the definition of agriculture. So, to break the word, in fact, it is agar and culture, so meaning soil and cultivation. So, anything that is cultivated on soil, grown as a crop, we get some harvest output out of it, will be known as agriculture. Yet, the important point to note and not to miss is that it will involve rearing the livestock also. Okay, so livestock meaning any kind of animals, maybe milch or domestic or um, for any other purpose. So when you rear them, when you are practicing animal husbandry also, it will be classified as practicing agriculture only. Because that, again, going back to the definition of soil and cultivation. So wherever that is being reared and there's an animal involved who's breeding from, or eating directly from the crops on the soil. So perhaps that's the reason. So this is the formal definition saying the science and the art of cultivation on the soil, raising crops and rendering the livestock or rearing the livestock will be called as agriculture. Now there are a few other things which may be practiced along with agriculture like sericulture or pisciculture or viticulture or horticulture. We've seen in class very correctly that seri culture is silkworms related to breeding them or rearing them on mulberry trees. Pisciculture is about breeding of fish, viticulture about grapes, and horticulture about flowers, fruits, and vegetables. So your urban, garden, if you hold any, that will be clubbed under horticulture. Okay. Now, another factor to be noted is directly when you are, eating the food, it doesn't come out on its own. So there are various inputs involved there. What kind of processes go before the food reaches you is something very nice that the chapter teaches you. So the first input would be the machinery. The second would be the seeds. Third is any kind of chemicals or even herbal pesticides may be there because that would be needed by the tree in case it is attacked by a pest, or maybe while it is growing it might need some kind of attendance. So other than that, the geographical and the physical inputs are almost every time the most critical element, being the sunshine, the rainfall, the temperature at a place, the soil, and lastly, the topography, that is the slope. How steep is the place, whether it is a plain or a plateau, etc. Being the process coming after we give all kind of inputs to the soil and we start, the process. The first one is that we have to plow the soil, we have to sow the seeds, we have to spray some pesticides as needed. And after all this, the grains will grow or the crop gets standing, and there'll be labor needed to, harvest it. There'll be some kind of machinery needed to remove the husk or, clean the crop, remove any weeds if there are, etc. And lastly, there is the storage requirement, which is in today's world extremely crucial because we are traveling distances, a lot of distances when we are eating any kind of food, any kind of crop for the matter. Like some people might claim that they have got jawar from the authentic Solapur market, or some people might claim that they've got bananas all the way from Jalgaon, etc. So all these kind of depends on the shelf life of the crop also, definitely. But then what kind of storage facilities are required is one of the essential process. Okay, you cannot escape that thing, and therefore it is included in this chart. And finally, what do we get when we give the inputs and we do the process? What we get is the standing crop, We get a lot of grains, a lot of pulses, any kind of vegetable or horticultural output. And besides all of that, there is also, as I said, during animal rearing and everything, as a output, you could claim that animal products like the skin or the hide of the animal after it has passed away. Now, in the ethical sense, let us not decide that they are using it for the wrong purpose. Then the milk and the meat, and that one of the primary outputs of agriculture. This is the second important concept. The first being the definitions of agriculture and all allied occupations, supplementary occupations. Second is the input, process, and output of agriculture. And thirdly, we are coming to a overview of everything. If we are living in the city, what kind of things go about to get that to your doorstep? So let us go from that angle. So let us say that the primary sector is the place where the farm is located. Okay, as I've given in the example, the first step is the farm. Second step is the factory, where maybe it will be filled in bags and sealed for any air and humidity. And third is it gets to the market. So this cycle is a part of trade, right? So that's called an economic activity. And after we are trying to know more about the economic activity, we come to know that there is a certain basic thing which is not changing the natural process or output a lot. So that is the primary sector, where only the basic or the raw product is handled. There's not much processing or doing anything to it. That is the primary sector, which could be the farm, as I said again. So secondary sector, if we take the example of wheat, for example, so secondary for wheat may become bread at a bakery, right? So that's a place where the grain is actually turned into one kind of agro product. Okay, so that will be the secondary sector of the economic activity, where you are processing the natural output. And lastly, what does tertiary sector do is, this bread, it will get to the shop, maybe the small tempo that comes, or the any kind of facility which is used to get it to a shop close to you, is the transport service. Okay, so this service may cater to primary sector also, to secondary also, taking the wheat to the bakery and bakery to the shop, etc. This kind of services will be a part of tertiary sector. So these are the three important things to remember in this chapter. Continuing the important part again, is that there's a concept called good food for all. Okay, so I have shown a very telling image here of food grains. What if there was no food? Would the world exist? Is a question, right? So when we see this map, we are assured that yes, every place has some kind of staple food or good yield or output, etc. And that is what is essential for all the people, right? So we cannot imagine that a person somewhere in Africa might be starved, and we, on the other hand, are enjoying or wasting food, correct? So this is what the chapter is also teaching us, that food security will exist only when all the people at every time have access to sufficient, safe and nutritious food to meet their dietary need and the food preference also, like your own choice and whatever you need. As a student, perhaps you need something else. As a person who's working as a road laborer, you'll need some more calories, etc. So those dietary needs and food preferences, including all that, when you're getting nutritious, sufficient food for an active and healthy life. That is food security for all. And that is when agriculture gains a lot of prominence. So agricultural development could be called as the first step towards evolution, right? When we have seen the Indus civilization in the past classes, what does it teach us is that without agriculture, people did not know where to settle down. this entire concept of human beings forming groups and settling into villages and then later big towns, etc., was through this small farm. And therefore, how to make that small farm also prosper is the concept of agricultural development. So this will refer to all the efforts which are made to increase that farm production in order to meet the growing demand of an increasing population. So we all know that the population is rising at a very fast pace, and therefore the food demands have risen too. Also, food demands like some exported food, imported food, and everything. All those trends get into this, and therefore we need to see that the farm production is increased. So, in what manner can we do that? There are like 5 things. As you can see in the images, they've used very smart technologies, like maybe catching the solar energy and converting it to run the pipe on a farm, or using the small sample to check whether the pest is harming the tomato, etc. So all these kind of scientific tools, plus some basic things like very good seeds, for example, very high yielding seeds. Then more land should be got under cultivation, should be brought under cultivation. More variety of crops, irrigation, and renewable energy in farming is also a very welcome trend. Fertilizers and better disease control in all the crops is essential for agricultural development. So when we saw, for example, the last part of the chapter speaks of, the case study of a farmer in India and in US. So the main difference lies in this place where they are not as developed in scientific tools or getting timely help, etc. And that we can definitely improve as time passes. Okay, welcome to the core of the chapter now. We are talking about what are the different types of agriculture possible and how do we do them. So, broadly, if I classify, agriculture has two broad classifications: subsistence and commercial. Commercial is broken into two, and subsistence is broken into two. And then primitive agriculture has two other examples to be discussed. So, let us see them in detail. In subsistence farming, you practice only to meet the family's need, and ordinary area outside the house is used. Household members will only work in the farm. There'll be minimum level technology, and it's generally practiced around rural landscapes, or even we could say, because we do it in the same purpose on our terrace gardens, that we don't sail it outside, or we use very smaller areas and there's only us working, etc. So it is an example of subsistence farming. Intensive farming is a type of subsistence farming where they are just focusing and intensing on more yield of, a crop. So at least twice a year, if I can take that same harvest, it will be more profitable. Correct? So that is what they're targeting. That a small plot of land is acquired or taken on rent. More number of people or labor force is used. Simple tools are used for cultivating more than one crop per year. Thick populated monsoon regions of South, Southeast, and East Asia, like Myanmar and rice farming, are examples of intensive agriculture or intensive subsistence farming. Coming to a few examples of primitive subsistence agriculture, one of them is shifting cultivation, which is in Northeast India, Malaysia, Brazil, Mexico, and known by different names there. It's mainly this method, okay, that is why it is called as slash and burn, meaning cut and burn them, and then you mix them with the soil. You grow one single crop harvest like a potato or yam, and leave that piece of land after you have taken that harvest. Okay, so once you're done with a particular patch of land, you move. So you're not staying at a same plot, or you don't own that land, etc. That is the difference. So that is why it is called as shifting or slash and burn cultivation. Nomadic herding is something where animal rearing is practiced. Dry regions or deserts like Central Asian desert or countries, Sahara Desert and Indian states of Jammu Kashmir and Rajasthan are very good examples. The fodder and the water of the animals is the prime motto of the nomadic herders. They go in search and along some same routes, like they define that route per season, etc., and they move about that route, and they survive on animal products and trade of those with others in the market. Now coming to the brighter spot in agriculture, I would say, because commercial agriculture is really well paying, especially if you have a lot of land, a lot of average land and holding. So in New Zealand or Europe, there are dairy farms which are extremely popular because the milch animals like cows and buffaloes are reared on the farm, and they grow small crops, and they are sharing the attention between crop and an animal, and that is highly successful when they grow one food crop and a fodder grass for the animal. So that type of farming is mixed farming. In plantation farming, you have Malaysia, the rubber plantations, or coffee in Brazil, or tea in India. Tea, cashew, mangoes in India are all plantations. Now, what is plantation is that they generally grow cash crops, crops which are in regular demand, then high paying also. Then there's huge labor and money involved to invest. There's processing, packaging in the farm and nearby factories, and it will need a good transport network near the plantation agriculture. Now, this is a nice chart of, several pages of textual content where they're explaining what kind of temperature and rainfall and humidity and soil is needed for particular crop. So you can pause a while, you can just refer the chart. Please do take a minute and draw it in your own classwork so that it is best understood. I am sure that you will understand the slide on your own, because it's about food crops: rice, wheat, maize and millet, and fiber crops of cotton and jute. Jute being the golden fiber, it's now coming much in vogue. Beverage crops of tea and coffee. Then we speak about what is best or conducive to their growth and which are the major producing regions. In the map work, we have focused on India and which states are producing best wheat. So the major producing region is Uttar Pradesh. Then coming to cotton, it is Gujarat. Coming to tea, it is Assam. Coffee, Karnataka. Right? So this is what we've done in the map work also. And the other conditions being here, I want you all to please note them down in the textbook, in the classwork, and then it will be best understood or um, you know known to you. This is a nice picture slide where you can see that this is a Rajasthani nomadic herder carrying his herd of camel. This is a Jammu Kashmir, sheep herder, and he has got his flock of sheep along with him and grazing on some nice plains. Now we are seeing the next picture, which is of slash and burn. You can see that they are actually cutting the trees, they are burning them, they are mixing with the soil here, if you can see, and look at the texture. Yes, drastic difference. But then after everything, when they get the harvest, again, the same process will repeat. Maybe after some time, but yes, slash and burn is using that same plot of land after some time. Now we're speaking clockwise in the slide. First is the jute fiber. If you can see the small rope, this is the actual root of the tree, which we take out threads from. Second is a cashew plantation. Okay, plantation agriculture again. Look at the methodical approach, the distance between the trees, and how the fruit is properly hung with a stick, etc. Like they give them support, etc. So all these are done on a regular and scientific basis. Third is the product of a slash and burn cultivation. This is yam, because we might not discuss or see it in very commonly. I have put the picture. And the next is cassava. Cassava is again very similar to ratalu that we have in India, but a different type of tube root, maybe kand, as we know, like that. And the last one is fodder grass. Okay, so sheep would eat something which is very very low in height, of course, due to their build and everything. But this is the sorghum or the jawar, generally jawar or bajra, which is the leaves are used for the um animals. This is a crop called as napier grass, and this is also a very common plant in Pune, which is eaten by goats, right? The leaves. So that was all, I guess. And I come back to the point where I want to insist that everything else can wait, but agriculture cannot. So, towards the first step of development, let us start from a sustainable point of view. It has to be agriculture, because we can't build a peaceful world on empty stomach and human misery. Misery because we wouldn't survive without food, right? This is a very famous person and scientist, wheat scientist, Dr. Norman Borlaug, and he had constituted the World Food Prize. And since then, it's very very popular since 87. So about 35 years now, yes. And in 2020, you will be very glad to know that Dr. Ratan Lal, who is a native from here, like he was born and brought up in India. He's from Punjab University, and now he's a citizen of America. So he worked on soil rights. As funny as it may sound, but this is one of his approach of improving the food production. And this is how new things will come up, and I hopefully feel that you all will also like to practice it someday. Thank you.